Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the TFIM show, the dreaded sequel, but hopefully it can live up to the standards set by the first episode. Today I'm going to be chatting to John Clark, who is the ex-185 kilogram man who ran 48 marathons in 48 days. To find out how and why, stay tuned and make sure you're listening. Massive shout out to Graham from @Graphics for Coaches, who have provided the only sexy part of this whole podcast, which are the graphics. And you can follow @Graphics for Coaches. Go and look at their Instagram page. There's a ton of free content and information that you can take to make your business look as sexy as this podcast. Anyway, let's get to it. We've got a show to do. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, tell someone about it. Thank you very much in advance, and I will speak to you all soon.
For the few people in attendance and the dozens who are listening all around the world, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, from his spare bedroom in Norfolk, England, Mark Laws asks you to get ready to fight fucking Monday!
Right, let's get the show on the road.
Just as you said that, I choked on my water. Not the first time you've made me choke, anyway. Right, John, welcome. I'm going straight in. The first round is called the last minute, so I'm doing the last minute first. I do need a catchy title, but I think it's good. I think it works. Basically, I'm going to ask you. I'm still suffering with that water in my throat, by the way.
Just go get a whiskey, mate. That'll clear it.
Professionalism to the nth degree.
Edit it out, mate. Edit it out. No one will know.
Oh, I can't be bothered. I'm going to ask you 8 questions, and for each question, I want to know what is the last thing in that category that you would want to experience. So basically, it's your favourite thing that fits under that banner.
Right. Okay.
So, for example, the first question: if you could only ever have one meal, what would your last meal be?
Last meal or one meal for the rest of your life?
Last meal.
Steak.
What are you having with it?
Oh, all the trimmings, from fries to onion rings to a little bit of a salad garnish. You obviously don't want to get too healthy if it's the last one going. Peppercorn sauce, all the trimmings, you name it, it's on there.
And how are you having your steak cooked?
Medium rare.
Oh, good man. Good man. Last drink.
An old fashioned.
Last movie you'd watch.
I'm going to go a movie that seems to be on repeat in our house at the minute, which is Top.
Oh, mate, your signal cut out there. What movie is it?
A movie that's been on repeat in our house at the minute, which is Top Gun.
Top Gun, brilliant. What would be the last band or musician that you would listen to?
Good question. These are going to be quick fire, aren't they? We'll go Queen.
Last book that you would read?
I mean, if I'm dying, probably the Bible. But other than that, I would want to actually reread that I've not read since I was a kid, Lord of the Rings.
Okay. You're just trying to drag it out, aren't you? So
yeah, exactly.
Leave
I'm not
standing there. Mate, you've been reading that for 3 months now. Come on. What would be the last town or city that you would visit?
Oh, Ripon.
What would be the last hobby that you would partake in?
I'm going to say probably play a game of rugby with my mates.
Does masturbation count as a hobby? I'm asking for a friend.
I suppose it could do. Does it provide enjoyment? Are you paid to do it?
Yeah, yes, and
Probably,
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you paid to do it now, that's semi-professional behaviour.
Yeah. Anyway, last question of the quick fire, not so quick round. Who would be the last iconic person that you would want to be exposed to?
So is that the last conversation you'd have before you died? Is that the general thing?
Yeah, you can interpret that
Then
way. Yeah.
I would avoid any icon or celebrity. I'd just go with my wife. I say just, it's like she's a baby prize, but I'd go with my last conversation on earth. I'd like it to be with my wife.
All right, some good answers there, mate. Some good answers. Right. That's just my little bit of fun way to get to know you. Even though you stole my last meal, you stole my last drink. You probably stole my last hobby as well, masturbating at the rugby. You stole most of my answers. Right, so for anybody who listens to this, they haven't got a clue who you are. My first question, who is John Clark?
That is a very good question. I guess to define oneself, but without going on a philosophical kind of monologue, but I suppose father, partner, friend, an overly philosophical thinker, I probably would also add. A man, I guess, with many hats, but I suppose the reason that we're here talking today, I guess I'm a seeker of hard and stupid things, all in the name of charity and trying to show people that you're capable of far more than probably what you realise.
Yeah, like your signal just cut out a little bit there, but you said like seeker of hard and challenging things.
Yeah, seeker of challenges and doer of hard things is kind of like a tagline that I think went on a website somewhere one last year. But yeah, I suppose the thing that's brought us to probably you wanting me to be on the podcast is that's kind of what I suppose most people in the online Instagram world would know, if they know of me, would know me of that idiot that does stupid things, trying to raise money for charity, but trying to show people that you don't have to be defined by what you look like, how much you weigh, what you're traditionally good at. Doesn't mean you can't do some of the things that people say you can't.
Yeah, you are right. That is exactly why you're very high up on my list of people. Sort of the like go through like I don't know, you tell me what I'm missing. So you started off, as far as I'm aware, some stupid 24-hour ski erg challenge, which was world record. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the one.
So, and that was just banging out as much distance as you can in 24 hours. Does that world record still stand?
It hasn't. It's actually been beaten. I said when we went into COVID that I guarantee it'll get beaten because everyone's got too much time on their hands. So yeah, it's been beaten 2 or 3 times since I held the record.
Oh, well, you'll have to have another go then, won't you? And then good. Where we knew each other. I knew who you were back then, and we sort of crossed paths and spoke at events and stuff, but not a huge amount. But then when I became a lot closer to you and a lot more aware of you was the 48 marathons in 48 days in 48 counties, one in each county, in the whole country, attempting to raise £48,000 for children who go to bed or wake up hungry. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the one. I did 100,000 meter ski erg before that as well, just to throw that one in there. I held both world record ultra endurance records on the ski erg at one point, which is a small claim to fame, very, very small claim. So yeah, I did the 24 hours, then the 100,000 meter record, then the 48 marathons in 48 counties in 48 days. I then did very stupidly a half Ironman about a month after because I forgot that I'd entered it. Then the Marathon des Sables, which is tagged as the hardest foot race on earth. And then this weekend I did 125,000 meter in raise money for Calm and supporting some friends that are rowing the Atlantic. So yeah, it's been a fairly busy and hectic 3 years in terms of different challenges and different endurance events, and some on machines, some running. just doing bits.
Yeah. The thing that interests me the most about this, well, there's two things actually. One is like the perpetual battle between selfishness and selflessness. So we'll put that to one side, and we can chat about that in due course. But the other one is like when all of these things you're talking about, all of these events are endurance events. And when you think about an athlete that everyone can picture, and we go, right, Usain Bolt and Mo Farah. Usain Bolt does 100 meters, so he's very lean and muscular, and that helps him to produce the power to get from A to B, which is a very short distance in a very quick time. Mo Farah is doing 10,000 meters plus marathons, skin and bone. There's not an ounce on him, and he's going for hours and hours and hours and hours, like long distance. But you are fucking massive. Like, to be polite, you well, because before all of this, you were a competitive strongman. I've seen the pictures of you competing with and against Eddie Hall before he won the world's strongest man, and I know you've got numerous strongman records as well. At your heaviest, am I right in saying you were over 30 stone, 27, 28 stone?
It was 185 kilograms in new money. I can't remember what exactly that is in stone. But yeah, so I suppose that's the setting of the scene, I guess, in terms of a lot of the stuff that I talk around in terms of kind of put in a box and told that you can't do something because you're a certain weight or a certain size. But yeah, I came from, I broke my neck playing rugby, then went into strongman, competed around the country and around Europe in that, and then decided to retire from that when I was 185 kilograms and bordering on a walking heart attack, and then went into the endurance stuff. So I dropped down a chunk of the weight. I think my lightest weight, well, I started the 48 marathons weighing 115 kilograms, and then I finished it at 98 kilograms. So wow. Yeah, running's not great for gains, but yeah, so I've kind of been on this journey in terms of weight loss and size and changing shape and changing your body to fit the purpose of what it is that you're doing at that given time. And I think was it Ross Edgley's quote, "If your body's a tool, not an ornament." So I just try and live by that statement, really, that you can craft and change your body to do whatever it is you want. And I didn't actually realise that I'd done all of that stuff within 3 years. It was only because the skio popped up as a memory on Sunday that I realised that, yeah, I've done quite a bit in 3 years.
Yeah, that's not a lot of time at all. And so ingrained within you, trying to prove that point that sort of you don't need to be put in a box and you're this size, you're this shape, these are the physical traits you've been given, therefore these are the only options available to you. Like, although you're personally trying to break that mold, but how often were you coming across other people that almost kind of didn't break out of those boxes, if that makes sense? Like, was it a thing that you were noticing other people restricting themselves, or was it just you wanting to prove to yourself?
I think it all starts with you wanting to prove to yourself that you can. I think if you're just going to do something like an hour-long challenge, then yeah, you can be massively extrinsically motivated to put 2 fingers up to somebody, but putting yourself through a 24-hour event or a 7-week event like the 48, then there has to be much more than just an external motivating factor of proving people wrong. Don't get me wrong, there's a massive part of it that they form fuel along the way in the days where you're struggling and lacking motivation, things like that. Then David Goggins calls it his cookie jar, doesn't he? That's probably the one and only time you'll ever hear me use David Goggins as an example of good practice. But yeah, it's a fairly common analogy now, isn't it? If when you're struggling, dip into the negative things that people have said that you can't, and that helps you get over the line that little bit further. But no, for me, my motivation's been internally driven to prove that I can, and hoping that shows others that they can too, rather than trying to upset people. That the thing is, like, doing the 48, I got heavily criticised by running clubs, because I didn't fit their mould, and because I was doing stuff that people like to think that the sport they do is really difficult and it's really hard, and that they're elite. And like, anyone can run a marathon. Your training is going to dictate how fast you run it, how sore it is, and how long it takes you to recover from. But if you're willed enough and you want to do it enough, you can run a marathon tomorrow. But runners don't like that, because they like to think, well, some runners don't like that because they like to think that what they do is special. So no matter what you do, trying to show anyone that something is more accessible than people realise is always going to upset those that do that thing, because they like the fact that it feels a bit elite and that you've got to be a special person to do it.
Yeah, that's their special little bubble, isn't it? That's their thing.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. So you touched on there about some runners or some running clubs, I don't know, feeling like getting a bit peed off with you doing your thing. But I know, because I was with you for 2 days, and may I add, the 2 hottest days, other than the couple of weeks we just had a month or 2 ago. Like, I think it was like 30 odd degrees. I did a Tuesday and a Thursday with you, so I had a day off in the middle, but they were both really, really hot days. But as we were going around, I remember talking to you, and I couldn't believe the amount of shit you had got, and the amount of people you had got shit from as you were chugging along, going through your journey. So I mean, that's one of the things I want to touch on, just for no reason other than for people to sit and listen to this and to think, fuck me, how have people got so little going on in their lives that they have to resort to try and sort of knock someone else down in that manner. So other than running clubs who were taking umbrage, what was say, I don't know, your top 3, your favourite insults or complaints that you received before, during, or after the 48?
There are a few. One of my favourite ones was the fact that apparently that I wasn't actually running the marathons and I was on a bike. And the same bloke also accused me of pocketing the money as well, despite the fact there's a thing called the Charities Commission and Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. There's something to say about you just pocketing best part of 50 grand. And also, if you've ever tried to travel on a bike at the speed that I was running, I challenge you to stay on the bike, let alone do 26 miles at that bloody pace. And also, do you not think someone would have seen me tootling around on my bike across the county if I was just trying to fake it on a push bike? So that was probably one of the top 3.
Or what about the hundreds of people that spent a day with you at some point and did it with you as well?
You're all in on it, mate. You're all in on the con. I was paying you all to do it. I comment on the post saying if you don't believe me, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But what I will take umbrage at is you saying that I've pocketed this money. The money is going into a public account, a public-facing charity that's managed and monitored by the Charities Commission. So take from that what you will. It was up there, but it was a running club that didn't want to get involved as they didn't think it was basically within the spirit of making running more accessible, because they thought I was making running sound excessive and difficult, and which is ridiculous. It's literally the polar opposite, isn't it? If it was that
but when I saw you made running look difficult, but you didn't make it less accessible.
Yeah, I think it just genuinely baffles me that I think the challenge is people will judge you by their yardstick, their perception of things, and this is what I tried to remember with the bloke that was accusing me of pocketing the money. I was like, actually, you're probably judging me by the standards of what you would do with that money. With the greatest respect in the world, and I hope this doesn't sound like a dickish thing to say, there are easier ways to make 48 grand. Stay at home for weeks working on my business than me pissing around, running around the country would, and also would have been above board and legal. So I guess the point that I'm making is that he judged me by what he would do if he saw 48 grand sat there. Would he donate it to the charity it was meant to go to, or would it find its way into his own back pocket? And people, you just got to remember, people view you through the lens of the behaviour that they deem is possible. And I had this with strongman. When I was competing, I deadlifted 400 kilograms, drug-free, natural athlete, never used anything when I was competing. And the amount of people that said that's not possible, you're definitely taking gear, you're doing it secretively and all this. And it's like, no, that's your perception of what's possible without drugs. You don't think it's possible, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. Yeah. And the irony is, if we all lived with that in that headspace, in that sphere, then we'd all the world wouldn't progress. There'd be no tech developments. There'd be no developments in engineering and science and all the other things if our constant belief was limited to what we think is possible, given a set of parameters. Same as the 4 minute mile, was it?
Yes.
When that got broken, and since then it's been smashed hundreds of times. Now it's been broken by one person. And it's same as the 48, right? Someone's gone and done the 48-30. Someone did what I did, but in 30 days. Like, fair fucks to her. It's like, that didn't even give me 6 months to enjoy it, but never mind. But again, whenever you try and do something that hasn't really been done, or it upsets the status quo, it is going to piss people off and upset people. Because I had one runner that basically criticised me, saying that they thought that it was a fool's errand, and they'd looked into doing it but decided that it was a pointless task. When I a little bit, and I got myself, so I started not arguing about, but questioning and digging a bit deeper. And what it actually translated to is that they didn't have a career or a lifestyle that allowed them to take 7 weeks off to go and do the task. Yeah. And again, it's you've convinced yourself that it's a stupid idea because you can't do it because of the parameters of your life with being just disappearing for 7 weeks. Yeah, that doesn't mean
they've only got 2 weeks holiday they can take.
Yeah, exactly that. I hate this whole like wanky fixed term mindset and growth mindset and all that shite, but it is relevant to this, so I'll drop it in. But it is that whole like growth mindset, isn't it? Like if you're doing something like good, incredible, like if you're use business as an example, if you're running a personal training business that's absolutely smashing it, you're killing it in terms of how many people you're working with, how much money you're making, how much freedom you've got, blah blah blah. I seem to look at that person and go, what a bellend, what an arrogant prick, who the fuck does he think he is? Whereas I look at that person and go, fair play, what can I learn from you? How can I learn what things can I take that you're doing and replicate them into my business and into my life, and how can I be better based on your successes? And unfortunately that was the thing that kind of was the golden thread that's run through all these last 3 years of challenges, of people that criticize and complain and have digs. But it's the joy of Facebook, social media, isn't it? I wouldn't have raised £100,000 if there wasn't social media, but at the same time, you've got to take the rough with the smooth. And if you put yourself out there, say you're going to do something a bit stupid and raise a large sum of money, then you've got to accept that people are going to take shots, take digs, and call you a bellend. I mean, I am a bellend, but not for the reasons that they think I am. So
just not a thief. I think I might have even said this in the last podcast, or if not, I find myself saying it on a weekly basis almost, is that you don't judge somebody else by your standards, and you just have to hope that they don't judge you by theirs. And sort of like we all have different a different idea of what our limitations are, what's hard or what's difficult or what's impossible. And one person's difficult might be here, but another person's difficult might be way up there. And just because that's their limiting factor doesn't mean it has to be your limiting factor. Like you're perfectly entitled to explore your own limits, and usually they are way fucking further away or higher than you realize.
Yeah, but it comes down to, do you want to? And this is the issue that I come up fairly consistently with people, is that when they talk about doing these charity challenges or doing things hard things. And what is the motivation to do it? And are you doing it because you feel like you should do it, or you have to do it, or are you doing it because you actually really want to and you care about a cause or the particular goal or whatever it might be? And I think the problem is, again, I'm not just blaming social media for all the world's problems. There's far more bigger reasons why the world is the way it is. But I think we all see people doing hard things, challenges, stupid things, legacy projects, raising big money, all that kind of stuff. And we all fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I should be doing that as well. And there's a lot of people that, for some people, running a 10K on a Sunday is as difficult as me doing a half Ironman. And that's absolutely fine. It's not a competition of who can suffer the most. But what's your hard? How can you challenge that limit if you want to challenge that limit? And how can you go on a step? I spoke to someone that had never run a 10K and they wanted to run 7 marathons in 7 days. And I was like, this absolutely can be done, but you've got to want to do it, because that's what's going through the times that are really fucking difficult. If you're doing it just because you feel like you should do it, then as soon as it does start to get really hard, you'll quit, you'll stop, and you'll listen to the naysayers and the people that criticize and all the other crap that comes with it. So the fundamental part of my last 3 years, and especially the last 2 years since I made some fairly significant lifestyle changes and selling businesses and whatnot, is why am I doing what I'm doing? And if I can't answer that question, or if I've got to ask it more than 3 times to get to the real reason, then I probably shouldn't be doing it. And yeah, I think, with a lot of people that push the limit, some of them are pushing them because they feel like they should, and then they don't enjoy, because the limit is actually a lot lower than what it actually is, because they're not really pushing it for the right reasons. But if they find something they really care about, something they really want to do, then that limit is actually much higher than they think it is. But you've got to care enough to push that hard to find it. If that ramble makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, no, well, it makes exact sense to me, because I've been there and I've done it. Like, as in, not to the same extent. I did 220 miles in like 6 days and a sort of a few hours. Average was about, I don't know, 30 miles a day, 30 miles a day. So not ridiculously short, but also not ridiculously long either in terms of the daily mileage. There's people who bang out 100 miles in a day fairly comfortably. That's quite common these days. I was nowhere near that. And obviously someone like yourself and various other people have done 30, 40, 50. There's people who do a marathon a day every day of the year. So it's like, so my event was very modest in the grand scheme of things. But for me, I up until that point, I never run further than like 5K. I know I can, but I just don't. And then when I did the 2 days I did with you was what, about 6 months or so before I did my event, and it was a case of I deliberately didn't prepare for it because I wanted to sort of drop myself in the shit and find a way of being able to do it. And I was like, it was a perfect scenario, because you were on day 15 when I came and did 1 day with you. And in my head, I was like, right, I know this is going to be difficult because I've never run a marathon and I've not trained to run a marathon, although I'm not a bad athlete, but I've not trained to run long distance. And also it's 30 degrees, it's really hot, so it's not ideal. I was like, but how can I dare to complain about being hot or tired or sore when you're 15 days ahead of me in terms of how many marathons you've done? So me dropping myself in the shit was a way of kind of testing myself, that I knew the bar was higher than 5K, but I didn't know how high it was. I was relatively confident that I could complete a marathon, but I was like, I needed that other incentive to be like, I've got to find a way to be able to do it, because there's no way I can complain about it and not do it when you've just done fucking 15 marathons in 15 days. And then when I had my day off in the middle, when I came back and did the Thursday, which was your day 17, I was like, I was in the same boat, but now I was very sore because I'd just done a marathon 2 days before. So I was like, well, I've got even less right to fucking moan about my problems, because you're on fucking day 17, and I sort of like, but my ramble is probably makes less sense than your ramble did, but they both make perfect sense to me together. Is that I sort of like, I knew the bar was up there somewhere. I just didn't know where it was. But the only way I could sort of test myself was by hanging on to your coattails and using you as a driver to not dare to back out, which I know I would do easily if I was by myself. Because as soon as it gets difficult, you'd be like, oh, yeah, I think my hammy's just gone. Maybe I'll do it another time. Whereas I had all those options were taken away from me.
I think that there's two points from there that I'd like to pick up on. But the first one was when you said a few times yours wasn't as hard as mine. I say bullshit to that concept. Like, I actually thought yours was in parts worse than mine by a way, because you hadn't trained for it, you hadn't prepped for it. You were literally one man, pair of socks, shoes, right? See what happens. And the fact that you hadn't prepared for it and you were still winging the direction and the route and where you were going to get there and all that I had massive respect for that. And the point that I guess I'm making is that it's not about comparison to others. Like, the whole comparison to teeth for joy, we've all heard that quote 1,000 times, but like, again, it kind of goes back to that first point that I made originally, was your hard isn't my hard, and that's fine, and it doesn't have to be. But did you challenge yourself to do something that you thought you could potentially realistically fail at? Yes. Did you learn something? Absolutely. Did you make a difference by doing that action? 100%. You're able to shed a load of money for worthwhile causes. So therefore, it's absolutely fucking irrelevant to the difficulty compared to someone else's. There's always some other longer runner, faster runner, bigger lifter, someone with a bigger dick than you that can do more than you. But it's not about that for me. It's about making a difference and learning about it. And I know one of the questions you're going to ask me in a bit is like the meaning of life and stuff like that. And for me, one of the biggest parts of it is to experience and to learn. And if you're not doing those things, then are you really living? And there's a whole different rabbit warren we can go down when you get to that question. But the other thing as well is, like, there's a real sense that I try and tap into on these challenges that I also use every day, that you used when you were with me, is that, well, you can't moan because the person that you're alongside is going through it on a far bigger scale. And it's the same with me when I was running and really tired and really struggling and things hurt, and I was going home to a hotel on my own. And I remember thinking, like, the whole point I'm doing this is to help feed people that can't afford to turn the lights on. And I'm going to get to go home, have a hot shower and lie in an air-conditioned room in the hottest day of the year. Like, people that can't afford to eat. And I'm a pint with you when we finished and a pub meal. Like, there's always somebody that's in more trouble and strife than you are, and I think it's always worthwhile remembering, no matter how hard it gets, that it could be a whole lot worse. And then the other side of it for me is, whenever you do these things, is you just, for me, I have to reframe it. When it gets hard, it's not, woe is me, this hurts, this is hard, why the fuck am I doing this? What I smile and say to myself is, I get to do this. Like, I get to run a marathon today. I get to do the 17th marathon in 17 days in the 17th county. Like, that's a choice. And as soon as you see it as it's a choice that you're making, the easier it is to continue on that journey, rather than feeling like you're trapped in something you don't want to do. And that's where people fail with their charity challenges or the big goals that they set, is because they're chasing something that they don't really want, but they're doing it because they feel like they should, or that they have to. And then when it does get hard, the power of choice becomes, let's find a reason to quit, rather than to continue. So I think that's why that whole deep-seated why that sits underneath it, and understanding what your version of hard is, not what other people's is the key to that development through these things and through these challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. If you remember at the beginning, I said this balance between selfishness and selflessness, I park to one side, and I'll bring it in now. I kind of, to me, I sort of, the way I frame that is very similar to what you've just said. I'm just probably phrasing it slightly differently. Is that, to me, I think there has to be an element of selfishness in doing something, but that's not I don't mean in the context, oh, if I do this, I might get on the front page of the newspaper, or I reckon the BBC might ring me up and do an interview for this. I could be famous. Like, not for those reasons, but I mean selfish in terms of like there's something inside of me that I'm going to learn, I'm going to gain from this, that's going to make me a better person, or whatever it does to me. But I'm going to benefit from this. But at the same time, having the selflessness of the cause that you're doing it for. And I kind of was constantly putting pressure on myself both ways of like, well, if I stop, then I'm not going to learn how to cope with difficult things when they come up in life. I'm just going to come up against an obstacle and I'm going to give up, and that's not going to do me any good. That's not going to be the sort of that's not the impression I want to give to my children as they then grow up. But then also, if I stop and I don't raise more money and more money, then the people who I'm trying to raise money for, who are less fortunate than me, they're not going to get the help that I want them to have. So sort of like I had this constant, I call it a battle, but this constant sort of to and fro between having to be really selfish to do it for myself, for my very clear reasons, but also wanting to do it for very noble causes that meant a lot to me. If that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the bit that a lot of people miss. Like, there's a lot of people, some people criticize thinking that it's just an exercise in your own ego and to prove that you can and all this. And like I know I've said earlier on that a large part of what I try and do is to show people that you can do these things, but it's not to try and get my dick out and swing it around and go, look how great I am. It's about me testing myself, which in turn can generate money and support worthwhile causes. Like, thinking about these people that you've never met will only take you so far, and it will help you to frame it, and it will help you put you into a different situation mindset wise of thinking, well, actually it could be worse, and the people that I'm doing it for are facing far, far worse than what I am right now. But those are strangers, they're faceless people, they're people you've never met, probably never will meet. So there has to be that selfish drive within you to see, can you do it? Like the 48 for me was a drunken conversation. The front row union was sat around a barbecue and we're chatting about stupid ideas, and someone said, oh, has anyone ever run a marathon in all the counties of England? The penny was dropped and the seed was planted, and away we went. And it was like, actually, can that be done? Can I do it? Could I be the first person to do that? And it went from there. And I think there's this very you're a child of the 80s, aren't you? So you remember Friends in its glory heyday. And it was when Phoebe was arguing with Joey about there's no such thing as a selfless charitable act, because by doing something charitable, you feel better for it. So therefore, it's selfish. And I think that's something that people really miss in terms of, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, is it? Like, you take home a bouquet of flowers for your wife. She feels loved and great, and you feel happy because you've made her happy.
Yeah. So it's nice to be nice.
Yeah, it's nice to be nice, and you get just as much of a hit in terms of seeing the impact of you doing a good thing than anything else. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, you say, if people are doing it because they want to be famous and they want, like the BBC told me that in no uncertain terms, challenges like mine are 10 a penny, and unless I'm a celebrity, they're not interested. So if you're going down the route of trying to be famous, it's not going to happen. And so, yeah, I think there has to be this selfish element. Can I do it? Am I capable of doing this task? And this whole like concept of balance as well is, I'm not a massive believer or fan of the term balance, because balance, for balance to be achieved, you have to sacrifice something along the way to rebalance. So if it's unbalanced, that means something too high, so we need to take some of that away to readdress the balance. So you are sacrificing something to achieve this mythical balance. And that's the side of it with things like charities. Like, to do these challenges, I had to sacrifice a hell of a lot to create this balanced ability to then go and do this challenge. Like, I had to essentially give away all parental rights to my children for the best part of 7 weeks to my wife and family and friends to give me the balance and the ability to have the time to go and do what I wanted. And I think that's the thing that people forget is like, it's not just a case of off you go. You got to sacrifice a few things, the balance that you need in your life to then go and do the challenge that you want. As with yours was 6-7 days long. So the having to go to your wife, going, right, there's the kids for 7 days, I'm off. Oh, can you come and support me and throw some Lucozades at me along the way? It's not as simple as that, is it, when you've got kids? There's a lot of things to consider and a lot of sacrifice that you've got to make. Like I lost nearly over a month of my children's life last year because I was running around the country. So yeah, there is always a sacrifice to achieve a balance to then achieve difficult things. And that's why feeling good about being nice is not a bad thing, because it makes all of that sacrifice worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the point that I find comes up. I find myself saying this a lot, is that two opposing things can both be true, and people tend to sort of go, oh, actually, well, this is what I think, this thing over here, so because I think this, therefore anything else that's different must be wrong and I must argue with it or I must hate it. I was like, well, no, two opposing things can both be true. Look at water. I've used this example with people before. Like, well, if you don't have enough water for a couple of weeks, you're dead. Like, you need water to survive. But if you get dropped off the side of a ship in the middle of the Atlantic, too much water will probably kill you. It's not going to be your friend. There's like, water can keep you alive and water can kill you very, very easily both ways. Like, just because you're in one camp or the other doesn't mean you have to then hate everybody else who is not in the same camp as you. It's like, I don't know, sports teams, like rivalries, politics, religion. They're like, no, I think this thing, therefore I fucking hate you because you think a different thing. And I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute. What if both of your things are absolutely fine and you just skip off in the meadow, like making daisy chains and holding hands? Like, it doesn't have to be a conflict.
Yeah, and I think because it's almost a friend of mine who's now ex-Royal Marine, he was saying that there's this thing, because old Shakespearean time and old literature and old language was like everything should be a pure and noble cause. And as a result, we've kind of gone down this route that if you do something, it should just be for one reason. Like, and he uses, we were talking about why ultimately soldiers sign up, why they go to war, and he's saying, like, on the face of it, the pure and noble reason is, well, for Queen and country, well, King and country now, but there's so much more multifaceted parts of that argument to unpack, from being out there with your friends and doing good things and making a difference, foreign and domestic, and all these other bits that sit underneath it. But you're told that it's just this pure noble cause that I'm fighting for Queen and country. And he was saying that that's why the military works, because they all appreciate and understand that everyone's out there for some different reasons, but there is this overarching umbrella as to why they're out there. And I think that that's the problem with a lot of these arguments that people have, is that we can all have diverse and different reasons for doing things, but for the most part, it is an overarching reason that we're doing them, and that's to challenge ourselves and make a difference. And if we do those two things, then my cause is no more nobler than yours. Your challenge is no more difficult than mine. It's just we're doing things to make a difference, to challenge ourselves in our own version of hard. And along the way, we'll learn some lessons, earn some money to help fund things for people that need it. And let's all just get along.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all subjective, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. So on that note, then, I've milked that first question dry. Moving on to question 2. What is the meaning of life? And in brackets, and why do you think some people struggle?
I think the meaning of life, I think it is to experience it, to learn from it, and to impact it. And okay. I think there's a lot to be said for this whole male ego, leave a legacy thing that I think we all tend to go down in our 20s of like make a massive difference, make a huge impact. This impact is measured in volume rather than actual acts, if that makes sense. And I think as a result, a lot of people chase things that mean much to them, but they think that that's what success is deemed at. Like, I'll give you an example. 4 years ago, my version of success was £1 million business, four multi-site, a multi-site gym network of 4 gyms, and me thinking I was doing all right. But my version of success now is my wife, my 4 children, a business that gives me the freedom to live the life that I want and the finances to do what I want to do with that free time. And I think that essentially the meaning of life is finding what your version of enjoyment of that life is, what you want to learn, what you want to experience, what impact you want to have. And that is no more right or wrong than your version. But it's almost finding what that meaning is to you and then going after that rather than what you think other people think you should be doing and what success is deemed as.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. The you see I see, or I think that a lot of people kind of have these little arbitrary lines that they think they sort of need to get to, and if I can get to that point, then I'll be happy and I will have achieved everything that I'm supposed to, sort of thing. And that might be someone else's line in the sand. It might be someone else's goal, and you just you've taken it upon yourself to then get someone else's goal. And for me, I find it a lot more important to sort of go, actually, fuck everybody else. What about, like, if nobody's listening, you're just talking to yourself in your own head, like, actually, what's more important to you? Not what do you think is going to be important for other people.
Yeah, exactly that. And sold a large chunk of my business off a couple of years ago. A lot of people said that I was mad, that I was stupid, that I was going backwards, but that's it goes back to that whole thing we said at the start. People judge you by their yardstick of success or their yardstick of values and morals. For me taking a step back and focusing on me, my wife, my family, and how I want to live my life, that to me is success. And like one of the boys at the rugby club the other day, he's only young, like 19, 20, and he was like, your Instagram's gone down, hasn't it? I was like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, you used to have like 14,000 followers and now you're down to like only 12,000. And I was like, 2 years ago, that number would have really upset me and pissed me off. But now I barely post on Instagram. I'm not particularly prolific or active. I'm not trying to grow a following on there. It just exists. And it's just interesting how when you take that step back and think, actually, why am I doing those things? And if I can't, like I said earlier, if I can't answer that question, then just don't do it. Like, I keep things like Instagram, for example, I have it running because I enjoy connecting with people like yourself and whatnot, but it's not the be all and end all. That doesn't define me who I am as a person. I'm not interested in trying to show everyone my highlight reel and how successful I am. And I'm more than happy that our family is looked after, taken care of. The people around me are happy. And with that, that's my version of success now. And it's also fine for that to change. Like I say, like 4 years ago, that wasn't my answer. If you asked me what success is, I'd have given you a very different answer. But as I said, with a lot of my athletes that I work with and a lot of the businesses that I hate the word mentor, that I coach, if you're not happy with a £500,000, you won't be £1 turnover. If you're not happy with a 300 kilogram deadlift, you won't be happy with a 350 kilogram deadlift. They are just arbitrary things that we like to chase because we like numbers. That's why weight is so prevalent in fat loss, isn't it? Because it's an arbitrary number that you can see go up, go down, or stay the same. It's why so many of us judge our success in our career by money, because you can see it go up, go down, or stay the same. We all love numbers to measure success with, but unfortunately, success is rarely measured by these arbitrary numbers. They're measured by how many times in your day do you experience happiness, contentment, enjoyment, and all those kind of like fluffy things that are harder to assign a fucking KPI to. So for me, a lot of the stuff that I work with businesses on is like, let's start at the end. And that's what I do with myself now, is like with the businesses, for example, let's just use the gym as an example. Like, we're all pushing to grow our gyms, more members, more people, more coaches. But what do you want to do with it in the end? Where do you see your gym in 10 years, in 15 years, 20 years? Are you going to sell it? Are you going to retire? Is it going to be a passive income? What's it going to be? And let's work backwards from there. But we get too caught up in this rat race in life of chasing the next number, chasing the next milestone, the next KPI, the next financial goal. And so to circle right back to the second part of your question is, why do people struggle? For me, aside from things like mental health, mental illness, things like that, I think it's because people have lack of clarity on what it is they're chasing, and they have unrealistic expectations that when they reach that goal, their life's going to change. And I remember when I won my first Midland Strongest Man title, I worked my absolute bollocks off for 2 years to win it. And I stood on the podium expecting the worlds to open, the clouds to part, the heavens to sing my name. And I remember standing on the podium holding that thinking, like, I've lost my goal, I've lost my focus, I've lost my intent. Then it was, all right, let's win it twice, let's win it back to back, let's be one of the few guys to win it back to back. Went and did the same, went out, trained my arse off, came back, won it. And again, stood on the podium, same feeling of emptiness. Like these arbitrary goals that we chase, they're brilliant for focus, brilliant for motivation, but it's not the finishing line of the 48th marathon on the 48th day that I remember. It's the conversations with you on day 17. It's someone opening up to me about their life living in childhood poverty on day 32, and it's the experiences along the way that I remember, not the arbitrary KPIs, the arbitrary finish point, because there is no finish point. It's like fitness, isn't it? Like, the day you start in the gym is the day you'll never end, because you'll never be like, even the best bodybuilders are not happy. There's still that little bit of quad sweep they want to add, or that tiny extra bit of definition on their left glute, and all the other shit. And so the initial question is, what do I think the meaning of life is to experience it, to learn from it, and to try and impact positively those around you. But don't get caught up in arbitrary numbers and chasing things that just don't matter, because it's never the destination you remember, it's always the journey that takes you to that end point.
Yeah, that's a quote that I recite probably on a daily basis to people. And I stole it from Stephen Aish, who I'll probably mention in most of these podcasts, and I'll when I have him on, like, he can just do all the talking for me. But he talked a lot about happiness and how, and the first time I heard it was from him, and he said happiness isn't the destination, it's the journey. And that's the mistake a lot of people make, or that's what he perceives as a mistake a lot of people make, is that if you think happiness is, oh, when I get there, I'm going to be happy. And invariably you get there and you're not, like you say, you stand on the podium and like no one really gives a shit. And then you don't really give a shit. Or like there's like a window of euphoria for minutes, maybe hours, but at the end of the day, like there aren't many things that so many people are actually going to be ridiculously pleased for you. Like you Olympic medalists will say the same thing. I've heard many of them say the same. It's like you hang your hat on this thing, and when I have that thing, I'm going to be so happy. But actually, if the journey, if you can derive happiness from the journey that you go along to obtain that thing, now you're onto a fucking winner, because you've got that balance of the selfishness and the selflessness. Like you've got enough intrinsic reasons to be doing something that you're benefiting from, that even then, if you don't make that exact destination, it doesn't matter. Or if the destination moves and it's now further away, or you change routes, or whatever happens, like anything can change, because if you're enjoying the journey and you're on the right journey for the right reasons, then it's very difficult for anything to derail you.
Yeah, absolutely that. And I think it's that whole, like, what we do in life echoes in eternity bullshit, isn't it? Like that we
All
all
right,
live.
Russell Crowe, fucking hell.
Yeah. No, but that's the point, isn't it? Like we're fed this idea in all of these films and media and things like that that like we'll never be forgotten if we live a life that's full of like impact. But like if you actually look back at history, the people whose names are well stamped into the history books are the pricks. Like they are, aren't they? Like you like the royals. Remember centuries ago, Henry VIII, absolute bell end of a bloke, killed a couple of his wives, divorced a couple, and abolished the monarchy.
I know who you remind me of. You look a bit like Henry VIII.
My gran, in typical old person style, calls me a budget Henry VIII. With less wives, but again, like look at the last century, Hitler, people like that. The irony is the people that are remembered are dickheads. Like, and I think the point is don't do good things. That's not what I'm not trying to say. What I'm trying to say is don't sacrifice your life chasing a legacy beyond this life, because I spent 10 years doing that and then realized that actually no one gives a fuck. Like I missed out on things to do with my kids, relationships broke down as a result because I was too busy focused on this legacy and building this massive thing much bigger than I am. And I think it's pointless telling a younger, you couldn't have argued that with me when I was in my 20s. I'd have been like, nah, that's spoken by someone that's just doesn't have the bollocks to be successful or driven or motivated. And that's not to say that that's wrong. If that's the thing that genuinely gets you out of bed in the morning and that's something that creates enjoyment and happiness and for personal development, then you crack on. Absolutely do that, but don't do it because you think it's because you think it's what everyone deems as successful. Do it because you think that that's success. And I think that that's ultimately the challenge, isn't it? It's like, how do you happiness is an emotional response to a situation. If you win, you're happy, but then you can then find out minutes later that your dog died and now you're unhappy. So happiness isn't this emotional state that we achieve and it's there for life. It's it's a response to a situation. And I think for me, the meaning of life, happiness, all that kind of stuff is to create a life that gives you as many moments in your day that create the emotional response of happiness rather than chasing this permanent euphoric state, because it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, nice. I like that. So you've just touched on there for the last few minutes. You've talked about impact and having an impact, leaving an impact, and legacy was mentioned a few times. So this moves us seamlessly into my third question, which is, how do you want to be remembered? And as part of your homework, hopefully you have a 70 character bit of text that if I was heading to the engravers this afternoon to knock up your headstone, I want to know what you would want to have written on it.
You've combined two questions there, haven't you? I've got some notes on the side of my screen to figure out which note was where. So I think how I want to be remembered. Again, it's how do you want to be remembered by what group of people? Like, do we talk about how do you want to be remembered by your friends? How do you want to be remembered by your family or your kids or anything like that? So I found this question really hard to answer in terms of what angle are we going at. So I just the note that I made was just a man that tried hard, failed often, achieved some things that people thought impossible, and maybe just made a difference along the way. That if that's what I'm remembered for as a generalistic overview, then I'll take that. Like, yeah. I think it's the Winston Churchill quote, isn't it? That you die twice, that the day that you're buried and then the day your name's said on earth for the last time. Like, and I know I've got a few friends that live by that quote and they're like, I'm going to be remembered, and it's like, that's cool, but you're not going to be here to see it. So, so for mine it is, yeah, a guy that didn't always get it right, but hopefully along the way did make a positive impact to family, friends, and strangers that hopefully the stuff that I've done has made their lives a little bit easier. And in terms of the headstone, I asked my wife this question because we were chatting about it. I was actually finding it quite difficult, especially with 70 characters, wasn't it? And sums up why I absolutely adore the woman. She just said, just go with top shagger and big lifter. But I didn't think that would be appropriate for the gravestone that our children will be visiting. So
they become a bit awkward when they come and put some flowers on it, but I'm sure they'll understand in time.
There's Grandad, look, top shagger, big lifter. So I didn't go with that in the end, but I went with challenge convention, tried to make a difference, 67% loose cannon, as that's always been a random stat that I held on with. Gave that as like an interesting fact about me at university, that I have an ability to be a loose cannon on the piss and in life in general. So I think I'd go with those three things. Yeah, challenging convention, tried to make a difference, and a bit loose along the way.
Like, no, it's funny. Go all the way back to the beginning where you said to me something along the lines of, "Oh, I didn't really know how to answer this because I didn't know what route we were going down," and that's sort of like the whole point is that we're going down any route, we're going down every route, and we're going down no route. It's kind of like what I suppose what follows on next is then that's what interests me is what routes you choose to go down. I'm assuming that by speaking to people like you, you're not going to go down the route of what can I write on this headstone that pleases other people that I don't like or I don't care about, which is, I don't know, like the afterlife version of a Facebook post or a tweet or something that you're just writing out to the metaverse. But I sort of like, I want to know, what do you want your nearest and dearest to, how do you want them to remember you? That's sort of like, that's more important to me. So I'm joining the dots together between, we've talked, I don't know, for half hour or so about the actions that you've taken, and then when you move into this stage, it's sort of like it joins some dots together between why you've done what you've done and like who it is you're trying to leave a legacy for, but for the right reasons. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges that we all face, isn't it? Is that you're always going to be criticised, no matter what you do, there's going to be critics.
Yeah.
Like history likes to remember, like let's just say Winston Churchill. History remembers him for the most part as a great wartime leader. But if you go back to the time when he was alive, there'd probably be just as many people that think of him as a dickhead. Same as like Boris now, like COVID, all that. Some people will view him as the reason why we got out of lockdown and everything else. Others view him as a bumbling idiot and didn't know which way he's up. So it's that classic quote, isn't it? To not be criticised, be nothing, do nothing, say nothing. So to many people, I suppose, is a generalistic statement to make, worry what people that would criticise them for running 48 marathons would think, instead of worrying about the people that care about them, that genuinely want to see them succeed, and want to share that journey of that wild roller coaster called life. And that, truth be told, is why I've kind of fallen out of love and interest with things like social media and stuff like that, is because you find yourself just posting things for a faceless audience that you don't know, and they don't really know you. And some of them will view it and think you're a dickhead, others will view it and think it's great. And it's just like, who am I actually trying to talk to here? And I think for me, that whole legacy thing is, like I say, did you positively impact the next generation to maybe make an impact to their next generation, to their next generation, and so on and so forth? And I've always said that with my children, is that I'm not here to teach them. I'm not here to build a business that gives them money. I'm not trying to give them wealth. I grew up in childhood poverty. We lived on benefits. My dad was disabled. He walked out on us when I was 13 or 14 years old. I'm not trying to build a life where they're protected and don't have that difficulty in their upbringing. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean I'm trying to make their upbringing hard. Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is, I'm not trying to create a lifestyle where they are just given money, because we can all lose money in a heartbeat, as COVID destroyed so many families, businesses, savings, and whatnot. Money can disappear, but what can't disappear are the values and morals that you've instilled in them of hard work, helping others, that it's okay to fail and fuck up as long as you learn from it and come back a better person for it. And for me, that's what I want my legacy thing to be. And it's not just my children, it's hopefully everyone around me and the people that they'll impact as a result. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Too many of us focus on, am I doing this because people will think I'm a good person, or am I doing it because I actually want to make a difference to those that I actually care about? And I've thrown a few cliches and quotes out there today already, but it's that whole don't take advice from someone whose opinion you don't care about. And that is that whole thing, isn't it? Of like, do the things for the people that matter, because ultimately that's all that matters.
Absolutely, yeah. And I sort of like my I've got my selfish reasons for doing these podcasts, but I sort of, if other people who listen to these conversations, my hope is that, let's say, for example, you've got someone who probably hasn't asked themselves these questions. So if they then get to this point and they're like, oh, actually, what would I want on my headstone? And even if they sit and have a shit for 10 minutes and think about it, or they go for a walk for half an hour and they think about it, and then if they go, well, actually, I've never thought about that, but what I would want on my headstone is this, that, or the other. This is how I want my kids to remember me, or my close friends, family members, my colleagues, or whatever. But then I want them to maybe join the dots together and go, well, if that's how I want to be remembered, how are my current actions going to lead to that? Well, if I keep being a prick and going out Thursday, Friday, Saturday night and not being there, spending time with my family, maybe they're not going to see me in that way. So maybe if I tweak my actions accordingly, then I'm going to get out the result that I want at the end, sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also another part of it why we do these podcasts and why we talk openly. And like, I've spoken to you a few times on podcasts and recordings, and I've always said, like, nothing's ever off the table. Ask me what you want, because how many relatives or friends or loved ones have potentially passed away and you never got to hear certain stories or ask them why they did certain things? And my granddad is my biggest male influence in my life, who passed away a few years ago, and 5 years ago now. And what I'd give to listen to a recording of him talking about his 20s and 30s and his time in the military and the life that he led and why he chose to do things that he did, and so on and so forth. And I think, yeah, stuff like this, like you say, your reason for doing the podcast, so that selfish reason for you to try and learn a bit more. And also, I know we've spoken about in the past, of also almost leave a monologue for your children to maybe one day listen to and get a better understanding of who Dad was. Like, my kids range from 9 months old to 11, and like we've never once sat down and talked about the 48, or they've been there, they've seen it, but we've not sat down and talked about the reasons for doing it and the time that was had and all those experiences. So hopefully things like this as well leave a thing for them to listen back to one day and maybe understand Dad that little bit better, and maybe increase that impact further as well.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I've always sort of I have a massive love-hate relationship with social media for all of the same reasons that you do. But I've always thought, as like, if you imagine if you could wave a magic wand and invent anything, imagine if you, like, your great granddad had an Instagram account and you could scroll back through it and it's like 1850 and here's me and the lads drinking ale at the tavern or whatever they're doing. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, imagine being able to see, like, I don't know, their thoughts and their views and, like, I don't know, like their personalities. And because people who are so close to us biologically, who we never ever would have met. I mean, my great grandparents were dead before I was even born, but you go back, you don't have to go back very far in time, and you have people who are, they're just names on a piece of paper on a family tree that most people probably wouldn't even be able to draw. They wouldn't even know their family tree once they go up 2 or 3 layers. But imagine if you could go back and, like, great Auntie Ethel's TikTok account from the 1700s. Fucking hell, look at her. She was fucking mad as a box of frogs. Like, maybe that's where I get it from. It'd be incredible. I would love it.
Yeah, no, I think ultimately half of the shit that we do, isn't it, is we want to leave the world in a bit better place, and things like podcasts and blog posts and things like that, I think, are all relevant in terms of leaving your thoughts. And they're a public diary, aren't they, at the end of the day? Like back in the 80s and 90s, if you had thoughts, you probably just wrote them down or spoke about them with your mate at the pub, and your kids would never see that unless they managed to find an old diary or journal and to read through it. But nowadays we can put those thoughts out into the ether, and I don't know, when we get older, when we're past our sell-by date and moved into the next world, that maybe they won't give a shit and won't be interested. But at least I know that my reasons for doing what I did in these last 5 or 6 years have been well documented on numerous podcasts, and if they want to listen to it, then there it is.
Yeah.
So on that note, kids, if you are listening, behave yourselves.
It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. Right. On that note, then, Jackanory time. TFIM obviously stands for Thank Fuck It's Monday, but I've got another acronym that I made up, which is thought-provoking, funny, interesting, and motivational. So I did ask you to tell me a story. So do you have a story that you can tell me that ticks any one of those boxes, but you do get a brownie point if it ticks multiple boxes? Depends how good your story is.
What a thing. Thoughtful, insightful,
Yeah.
funny.
Thought-provoking, funny, interesting, motivational.
So I thought this conversation would end up going down the route that it kind of has, in terms of this whole, like, stop worrying so much about legacy and live more for the things that matter to you. Because, and then that led me down the rabbit hole of thinking people that did great things that history forgot, that we've never heard of, and people that have done things that have literally changed the course of modern day history that have been forgotten. So if you think that running 48 marathons is going to leave a legacy beyond your children, you're probably wrong. And do it for not the reasons of trying to leave this massive multi-generational impact. So I googled people that history have forgotten. So here's one: Stanislav Petrov, a lieutenant colonel of the Soviet Air Defense Forces, who in 1983, 3 weeks after the Soviet military had shot down the Korean airline flight, he was a duty officer at the command center for the nuclear early warning system. And so, to paraphrase the story, basically the system flagged that a missile had been fired at Soviet Russia. So the orders were to basically fire a nuclear warhead back at America. He disobeyed orders, said that absolutely not, basically get fucked, I'm not doing that. And it turned out that the warning system was a false alarm. It was something to do with sun reflecting off satellite or whatever. So Stanislav Petrov is credited of being a person that, due to his decision not to launch a retaliatory nuclear strike, saved the modern world and civilization as we know it. So
let's hope that Stanislav was in his 20s when that happened, and he's still not retired, and he's ready to disobey orders any minute.
Yeah, exactly that. And so the thought I was going with this story, because I went down the rabbit hole and found all sorts of stories of people that time had forgotten that had done great things. But it just goes to show that, firstly, that guy was just a normal soldier, a normal bloke that decided to make a very difficult decision that changed the course of history. So the first thing, insightful, thoughtful, motivating thing, is that if that one bloke can do that and save the world, quite literally, what can you do with your life?
Yeah.
But secondly, I'm pretty sure he didn't do that and make that decision because of legacy. He did it because he thought it was the right thing, and it was the just thing to do, to disobey orders and do what he did to avert a nuclear war. So the second thoughtful part of that is do what you think is right, not what you think you'll be remembered for. And yeah, so that is my story, and that's what I'm throwing it up there for us to discuss.
Mate, it's a good one. I'll give you thought provoking because you think like, well, what if he was just like a pathetic little dweeb who did everything he was told just because that's how he'd been brought up. He didn't have the backbone to think for himself. So it's definitely thought provoking. Funny. It's not the funniest story you've ever told, but definitely interesting. And I'll give you motivational as well, and I'll tell you why I'll give you motivational for it, because he would have, like you say, a normal soldier whose normal job wasn't to divert attention away from a fucking nuclear holocaust, but he, just by doing his normal job without even meaning to or wanting to, he found himself in a position, a situation was thrust upon him, and there was a fork in a road that could have gone two very, very different ways. When he woke up that morning, he had no fucking idea that at some point during his shift, the shit was going to hit the fan and he was going to have to deal with it. And I find that you never know when you're going to get a bad phone call. Someone's dropped down dead, like someone's been hit by a bus. Something ridiculously bad has happened, or something ridiculously good has happened. And sort of like, no matter how shit your morning is, it might get better in the afternoon, or no matter how good your morning is, it might get shitter in the afternoon. And I find it sort of motivational for people to sort of be like, actually, so much else that I'm going to worry about isn't worth worrying about. I might as well just plod along, keep doing what I'm doing, stick to my principles, like my integrity, my bravery to stick up and stand up for what I think is right. And going back to what I said a minute ago, it's better to have those things and to not need them than to need them and not have them. So if somebody isn't motivated by that story to sort of put themselves in a position mentally to be able to handle a shit position when it comes up, or B, when a shit thing happens, to be able to stay calm and sidestep it, then I don't know what's wrong with them.
Yeah, it's also that reminder that the right thing is never really the easy thing.
Absolutely not.
Like, so was 70, 80 Russia. The punishment for disobeying orders is probably, well, the punishment for disobeying orders right now is court-martial, isn't it? So
yeah, I think at the minute the punishment at the minute in Russia is you fall out of your hotel window.
Yeah, so I
think it's about 6 people have fallen out of their hotel windows that were closely linked to the Kremlin.
Yeah, it's pandemic over there, isn't it? But no, I think that's why I chose that one, because I think there's a lot there in that focal point, that flash point where he could have gone, I'll press the button, to go, no, I'm not going to do that, and stand by the courage of your conviction to not do it, to disobey orders because you know that it's the right thing to do. So yeah, I thought that was an it wasn't anything to do with the story to do with me. I have absolutely no relationship to Stanislav Petrov, but I thought it was a thoughtful, thought-provoking, motivating story that kind of transcends a lot of what we've kind of touched upon today. That the easy thing isn't always the right thing, do what you think is right, and in that current time, not necessarily what you think is going to be. It'll probably be remembered forever if you press the button.
Yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
forever would have been about an hour.
Yeah. What was left of the civilized world? Yeah.
No, mate, that is good story. It's a very good story. Stanislav Petrov. Is that it?
Yeah, that's the one.
So, and little did he know that one day his story would be told by the most ginger man to ever run a marathon in the desert.
There you go. So technically, if we live by, I think it was the Winston Churchill quote: "If he died twice, he's still not dead. He's still his name's on planet Earth, so he's still with us."
Still going. Stanislav Petrov. I thought he still played for Spurs.
No, retired last year.
John, last couple of bits.
Yeah.
Big question. What regrets do you have?
I like the fact that in the pre-show briefing that you sent me, you were like, you're not accepting the wanky answer of I don't have regrets, because that would have been my go-to default to avoid this question. My biggest regrets in life have come from me doing what I think other people want me to do, or what I think is best for their feelings, rather than what is the right thing to do. Relationships that went on longer than they should have because I was scared of upsetting them and hurting them, and then in the end ended up hurting, upsetting them more because I wasn't honest to start with. Doing things in life that I thought other people expected of me, not because I actually wanted to do them, which then created more pain and drama when I stopped doing those things. So yeah, my biggest regrets are not actually doing the right thing isn't always the easy thing. So my biggest regrets have come from trying to save other people's feelings in some instances that's ended up then hurting them more than if I was just honest and upfront about where I was and what I wanted.
Which ties into all the stuff we just talked about, like the integrity, like the conviction in your own sort of beliefs, or how you want to be remembered. That like all those things tie in, and I doubt I'll probably get a better answer than that in terms of what I'm hoping to hear and why I'm asking the question. So listeners won't know this, but as you just alluded to there, when I sort of again, I don't plan these things too much, but I did warn you, these are some vague questions that I'm probably going to ask, and one of them is about regrets. When I wrote on the piece of paper, actually, I think I wrote, "Do you have any regrets?" question mark. When I just asked you personally, I was like, I'm going to ask it differently, and I asked, "What regrets do you have?" Because in brackets in the paperwork, I did say I'm not going to accept your typical bullshitty, wanky, "Oh, I don't have any regrets, I wouldn't change a thing," because like I don't think that's what people need to hear. I think, or I hope that people will listen to this and they will regret some stuff, some tiny little things or some massive things. I can't fathom, again, maybe this is wrong, maybe this is me judging other people by my standards, which I shouldn't do, but I can't fathom how anybody would not regret something that they've done in the past or something that they've caused. Therefore, by just hearing the typical bullshit mainstream response of no regrets, you just like, it is what it is, I'm not buying it. So I'd rather eliminate that. So rather than me saying, "Do you have any regrets?" and leave it open for someone to say, "No, I haven't got any," from now on, I'm going to ask, "What regrets do you have?" And your answer was exactly what I wanted to hear, and exactly what I hope will help someone else who's sitting there going, "Oh yeah, I didn't like to say anything, but actually I do regret a few things, but I'm not allowed to say because we're not allowed to regret stuff." Hopefully it makes them realize that it's okay to regret something, as long as you're learning and developing and progressing and doing something to not continuously repeat that action in the future.
Yeah, I think it ultimately comes down to that thing, isn't it? It's like, if you keep making the same mistake, then yeah, you've got a bigger problem there in terms of being completely oblivious to the fuck ups that you're making. My biggest regrets are that I didn't recognize the mistakes that I was making sooner, to have conversations or part company with business partners and things like that at an earlier conjunction, which probably would have saved heartache, time, effort, money, and all the other things that these things cost us. But that's the price of doing business in your 20s and in your early 30s, isn't it? You learn these things, and you make a mistake, you fuck up, you question, could I have handled that better? Yeah, probably could have done. And some will throw their toys out the pram and go, "Oh no, that guy's just a wanker." And it's like, or actually, could you have handled it more effectively, been a better person about it, been more honest, been more upfront, rather than that person just. I think the problem in life is we're too quick to turn around and say, "Oh, it's that person's fault." instead of taking responsibility, that maybe they reacted the way they did because you acted like a bit of a knobhead. It's like the Jocko Willink thing, isn't it? The American Special Forces Marine. His whole thing is extreme ownership, that you are responsible for where you are in life. And if you've got regrets, own them, learn from them, don't make them again. And I think anyone that sits back and goes, "Oh, I've got no regrets," then you're not really learning, are you?
I'm aware of Jocko's book, the Extreme Ownership book, and I haven't read all of it, but I've read bits of it. I got the gist of it, and it very quickly I sort of sat back and I was like, hang on a minute, how many times a day does something happen and my response is, oh God, that guy is such a dickhead, or oh my God, she is such a fucking bitch, or oh my God, that person is such an idiot. And I'm like, hang on a minute, what if the common denominator here is me? And what if there's something, what if I haven't explained or I haven't communicated something thoroughly enough for them to understand it well enough to respond in the way that I want them to? Or what if I've done X, Y, and Z for the last 10 years and that's caused this person to react in this way? And if I'm not joining the dots up between the two, everything is always everyone else's fault. And I just stay this little bitter, twisted little fucking scumbag that thinks everyone else is a fucking idiot. And I've been there, and I've spent decades of my life in that position. And I'm not saying I'm now perfectly on the other side of the fence, but I've had a little look over the fence, and I've got a leg over there. But I'm getting a lot better now at sort of saying, right, maybe that person's not an idiot or a dickhead or whatever. What is it in my actions or behaviors that might have caused them to react in that way? And then sometimes they are a dickhead, but very often you go, actually, yeah, shit, the way I've broached that subject, maybe that's triggered them and caused that response. Like, so maybe it was my fault that they've reacted like that. Maybe I've caused it.
Yeah, I think it's also an understanding that you don't know other people's journeys. Like, I remember going back a fair while now, but one of my exes that I just couldn't understand and couldn't figure out, and I just thought she was a bit of a knobhead in the end. But it turned out, speaking to her years on later, that actually she'd been on the heart of childhood abuse when she was younger, and then all of a sudden the penny drops as to why they were the way they were when we were in a relationship together, and it's things like that you. For me, I look at, if someone's being a dick, if I go, that person's a dickhead, I normally go, right, well, actually, what lens am I judging them through? Am I judging them to my standards? Because this is where I've lost friends in the past, is that I've judged them to a standard of behaviour that I would uphold myself. And unfortunately, you can't make everyone uphold your personal standard, because for some, your baseline isn't even their top level. It's above and beyond what they would expect to be as a friend, for example. But also, you don't know the journey that they've walked. You don't know the troubles, the problems, the trials and tribulations that they face, the traumas that they hold with them. Like, there's 4 or 5 guys in our gym that have fought in Afghan and Iraq, and have 2 that are really open about the fact they've got PTSD and all sorts of things as a result. And people could potentially look at their behavior and go, oh, what, understanding the thing that have led them to the way they are. And I think that's the thing. So my biggest regret has been judging people by my yardstick, not being able to walk a mile in their shoes before I judge them, and not handling difficult conversations with more honesty and integrity. And that's ultimately, though, unfortunately, when you do start acting like that, your circle does get smaller, but it becomes much tighter and much more giving and adding value to your life, rather than just getting pissed off with people all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Right, mate, final little bit. I asked you to write a letter. The small print is that you can write the letter to anyone, dead or alive, including yourself. You can write it for whatever reason you want to say, whatever it is you feel like saying. And the letter can also be based at any period in the past, present, or future.
Yeah.
So, who have you written your letter to?
I wrote it to my grandfather, no, my granddad. So as I alluded to earlier, my biological dad walked out when I was 13 or 14, never seen again, died 7 or 8 years ago. Didn't hear from him since the day he walked out. And my mum's dad essentially stepped into that role. I mean, you know what the teenage years are like, they're your formative years, aren't they? And I credit my tenacity, kind of relentless work ethic and things like that to my granddad. So when I say a letter, it's what I actually wrote on Facebook the day after he passed, but it's things that it's still alive, but I just thought it was also quite relevant as it kind of goes full circle in pretty much everything that I thought we'd end up speaking about today, which we have done. So I'll share with you what I wrote.
Perfect. All right, just let me. I just need to go and get some tissues, and not because I'm going to be wanking through it.
Yeah, we tried. Mate, you wanking to a man that's just passed away is probably even above your standards.
Yeah, mate. I've had some difficult wanks in my time, and this one's going to be up there. This is going to be top 5, but I'm ready. And mate, fire away. Just bear in mind, well, you're like every sort of 3 or 4 minutes, your signal just kind of like glitches for like 2 or 3 seconds or anything. So if there's like a line or anything that I miss, I might ask you to repeat it. But hopefully we'll get a good window where you should be good to go.
It's not an essay, don't worry. So, so this is written on the 29th of 2017. So yeah, 5 years ago now. Today we lost a man I consider to be more my father than my grandfather. The man who taught me many things: how to drive, how to strip and rebuild an engine, how to write, how to read a map, how to use a power tool, install a garage door, build a wall, how to shake someone's hand, and how to constantly search for a better version of yourself. The man who constantly believed I was capable of achieving great things, who believed in me more than I believed in myself, and never let me settle for being average. One of the last bits of advice he gave me before he passed seems pretty pertinent to share given today's news. He said, "You know, life is pretty short. Set goals, set a plan, get to work. Don't ever give up on them, but do not live with regrets of things that you didn't do and the things you didn't try. As long as you believe in yourself and your daughter, your daughter will be proud of you no matter what." A father, a husband, a teacher, a proud military man, and a friend. The most stubborn man I ever met. He'll be missed by everyone that knew him. So that's what I wrote to my granddad.
Brilliant, mate. Brilliant. And I didn't even get a semi.
You can save that for the recorder when you listen back to it when you edit it.
Yeah, I will do. I'll put it on a loop. No, mate, that was while you were reading that, I was thinking the 3 lines that you had on your headstone about experiencing life, about learning stuff, and about leaving an impact. And I don't know whether it's subliminal, maybe it's deliberate, maybe you knew that it was glaringly obvious, but to me, sort of like the 2 were almost like 2 sides of the same coin. Like I don't know, I'm thinking out loud as I go along here, but it's like the impact that he had on your life and the experiences that he gave you and the stuff that he taught you. Somewhere along the line, is that the sort of the subliminal undercurrent that's then made you want to do that with children, close friends, family members, people who are in your inner, more intimate circle?
Exactly. I only made that realization a few years ago, probably about a year after he passed away. But the time that when I think, if you said to me, name the best man you ever met, it's him, hands down him. And the things that I remember aren't his successful business, aren't the house that he had or the car, the lovely car that he drove, and they're not the things I remember. I remember the love he had for my gran, the love he had for me and my sister, and those memories of me and him arguing and falling out over how to use a jigsaw blade appropriately whilst doing some DIY, and how to use a drill, and all those little things that he taught me that I've used pretty much daily and weekly in my life as a supposed adult. And that the thing was for me. And I was like, all those things that we chase, like career, money, cars, all that shit, like that's not the thing that your kids are going to remember. It's not the things that's going to go on your headstone. It's not the things that you'll be remembered for. It's those moments of happiness that you share with that person, and those are the things that you'll talk about when they're gone. So yeah, I think that's kind of has come full circle with me, that the best man I ever knew is kind of a guy that I've modelled how I want to be remembered and how I want to treat my loved ones. And those that I've never met, but I can hopefully still make a difference in with the charitable stuff that I've done and will continue to do.
Right. Brilliant. Anything I add to that will only detract from it or ruin it in some way. That's like it's the perfect scenario for the end of the show, like to go full circle from the very beginning and to sort of accidentally come all the way back to where we started. And like that's the way it goes, isn't it? Like we easy come, easy go. We're not here for long, but there's varying ways of leaving an impact, and your granddad certainly did that for you. So happy days, mate.
Yeah, no, exactly that, and that's why I chose it, because I thought we'd go down the route of what is life, what is legacy, what is, why do you live the life that you live, why do you do the stupid shit that I've done, and yeah, so that's why I thought going full circle, that because that for me was the realization of the impact that he had on me and our loved ones, and that's ultimately how I try to live my life now. So I thought it was a good one to go circle back around and finish on that one.
Agreed, mate. It was perfect. Thank you very much for sharing it as well. And I don't know whether your granddad ever worked for BT or anything, but the signal for the last 3 minutes has been absolutely crystal clear. So I don't know whether he's got a hand in that, but it was it's been the most perfect bit, mate. Yeah. I appreciate your time.
Sorry if the internet's been a bit dodgy. I didn't realise, but if there's anything you need to re-record, let me know.
No, it would be all right. It's just like, but every I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes randomly, it'd just be like a little 2-3 second bit where it like pauses, and then you come in like speed talking for 2 seconds afterwards. But so like I don't think it makes a massive difference. Like mate, I'm not doing this for the quality of my production and editing skills.
Hey, you've got a jingle for your podcast. You've done it properly.
Well, I had that made years ago, probably about 5 years ago, and I never used it. And then I was like, fucking hell, I've got it. I might as well use it. So I was like, I do need a better one. I will work on all of the like, I don't know, the sound and the video and stuff like that. But to be honest, that's the least of my worries. What's more important, just speaking to interesting people about interesting things. And you've definitely ticked those boxes. I appreciate your time, mate, greatly, and for being a good sport and for humouring me with all of my random and vague questions. And I tell you what, while I've got you, I know you've got to do the school run in a minute, and my bladder is on red alert. I used to be able to go like days without going for a piss. Now I've got like a 2-hour window. I've to the point where I've even, don't tell Natasha, but I had to put like an empty vase down by my feet, because I was thinking, well, if we get talking and I need a piss, I'll just put it on mute and piss in the vase and deal with it, not tell anyone, wash it, put it back on the windowsill. But I think I'm going to make it to the toilet. But what I was going to say is, at some point in the not too distant future, I am going to have myself as a guest on my own podcast. And because we went back and forth for months on end about doing like a co-produced podcast, which you were too busy doing adult stuff to fit in, like I would appreciate it if you wouldn't mind being the host for a guest episode, and you can do the exact same thing but with me as the guest.
Absolutely. No, I'd be honoured to, mate. Absolutely. Just let us know when you want to do it, and we'll get that in the diary.
Cool. No worries, mate. Well, this side of Christmas maybe, but I'll when my yeses start drying up from would-be guests, which probably about 3 weeks.
I tell you what, let's do it in person with an old-fashioned.
Well, mate, absolutely, 100%, 100%. We'll do it, but we'll do it with 4 old fashions, and I'll bring the vase, so we can just like we can cross swords and not have to break the recording.
Maintain eye contact at all times. Yeah,
absolutely. Cool, mate. John, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And I'm sure I'll speak to you soon.
No, thanks for having me on, mate. Appreciate it. And also, just I know I've thanked you personally, but thank you publicly for the time that you gave me with the 48. Running 2 marathons with 0 training was an admirable time that you committed and gave to me. So thank you for that. And also, congratulations on your own charitable fun run. And was it Manchester? No, Norwich to Manchester, wasn't it in the end?
Norwich to Manchester, yeah.
So yeah, fair play, mate. Massively impressive, and I'm sure the money you've raised has made a massive difference. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. And also, you forgot to mention the most impressive part of the whole thing was the free beer that I blagged you from my local pub halfway through the marathon.
Yes, literally 20k in. Let's have a pint. Excellent. I'm on board with that.
energy drink, mate. It's all about the sports nutrition. You wouldn't understand.
Carbs, mate. Carbs. Fine.
All right, John. It's been a pleasure, mate. Speak to you soon.
I'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much for listening. 2 episodes down, and hopefully there are many more to come. I really enjoyed that chat with John. Slight change from the plan, which was me speaking to Dan Highcock. He had a change in his diary at the last minute, so Dan will be coming shortly in one of the future episodes. If you enjoyed that, if you thought that there was something valuable or insightful in anything that John had to talk about, or maybe even anything that I said, that'd be nice, then please do tell someone about it, share the wealth, and hopefully the podcast can grow from strength to strength and help as many people as possible. So anyway, that is enough from me. Thank you all very much. Thank fuck it's Monday, and I'll see you next time.